Hi everyone, my name is Cerise, and first of all, please let me know how the volume of this video is. If it is still low, then just leave a comment. I am trying a new camera position. Otherwise, today what I'm talking about is how life tends to happen in ways that we don't necessarily expect or plan for. So for a very long time, I thought that my life would never change, that things would always be the way that they were, or at least parts of my life, that I'd always want to be doing what I was doing in every single way, that I would always be taking a particular kind of approach. For example, in working with horses, that I would always be completely satisfied with what I was doing. And with time and with things happening, obviously things do change, and even something as simple as my taste in food has changed. So today I've been reflecting on how much what we think is going to happen and how we think our lives are going to turn out actually happens that way, because most of it doesn't. And the question becomes, who are we within the change that inevitably comes in all the different parts of our lives? Do we become inflexible, rigid and stubborn? Do we try to hold on to how things were, hold on to how we expected and planned for our lives to turn out? Do we try and force our lives to stay in the shape that we had envisioned for ourselves? Or do we become flexible? Do we flow? Do we move and change with the things that happen around us, with the way that our lives do inevitably change, and adapt to those changes so that we can make the best of what is here? Because at the end of the day, we are the ones living our lives. We are the ones responsible for how we live our lives. And yes, we also have a responsibility to those around us. And that particular point is equally shared amongst all of us. So, what I have done in the past is I have been rigid. I have been inflexible. I have stubbornly held on to how things were and how I wanted things to be. And what tends to happen when I did that is that I would have this kind of dissatisfaction, and it wasn't like I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Where did this come from? Why am I feeling this way? But also, to a degree, I was almost oblivious to it, but I wasn't actually oblivious to it. It was more that I didn't let myself look at those points. I didn't let myself look at, am I really happy with where I am, with what I'm doing, with every part of my life in this area? Even if it was something as seemingly simple as how I was working with horses, because for a long time, if I look back now, I did things that I definitely wouldn't do now. Now, given how I have changed and how my perspective, my perception has changed over time, the way that I did things and the way that I held on to how I was doing things and justified how I did things in the past, it's not the same as now. And if I look back into those moments, into when I was holding on so tightly to how I was doing things, it was like I believed so strongly that I was doing it the right way and the best way, and that there was no other way, and that I would carry on doing it this way forever into infinity and beyond. And it took time for that belief, that rigidity, to slowly release and let go. And what it wasn't one particular point that changed it. It was a gradual change over time, a gradual loosening of my grip on how I was looking at things, that I started to consider different ways. And I started to consider doing things differently because I started seeing and being introduced to different ways that had better effects and results than what my approaches were having. And so that's one dimension of it. But another dimension of it that is maybe a little bit more difficult for us to face, because it's can in a lot of ways be more personal and be more deeply rooted into who we are and how we've built ourselves over time, over our entire lives, is when it comes to the choices that we make in our life, in terms of the choices of how we live, whether it's our relationships, our careers, how we work with particular people, how we even how we interact with the world, how we interact with ourselves. All of these different dimensions where we can also become stuck in this inflexibility of, this is how I am, how I want to be, and always will be this way. I will not change, I cannot change, and this is just how it is. And we see this a lot in, let's take for example, in a relationship. Now, the important thing to remember here is, I'm talking about that point of inflexibility where it comes, where we are not willing to consider anything different to how we are currently living. So it's like we get stuck in these routines and these beliefs without considering that maybe I could do this differently. Maybe I could approach my partner differently. Maybe we could solve these problems differently together. Maybe I can reflect on who I am in this moment so that I can have a better outcome that will be better for both of us, rather than having the same reactions, the same responses, the same approaches, and not changing, not being willing to even consider changing. And often what happens is that over time that develops into a resentment and a dissatisfaction. So in the context of a relationship, we eventually become resentful of a partner. We become dissatisfied in the relationship. We start to blame it, usually, on everything else. We blame it on our partner. We blame it on, we're just not right together. But in actual fact, it's because we were not willing to consider that we can actually do things differently. We can actually be flexible. Yes, things do change over time. Let me change with those things. Let me adapt myself and adjust who I am, how I am, so that I can still be satisfied, so that I can still continue creating what I would like to create, so that I can still continue contributing in the way that I would like to contribute. So, in essence, I'm not saying that who we are essentially as people needs to change, because no, it's not about that. It's not about changing principles. It's not about changing core beliefs. It's about changing who we are in relation to those things. How are we practically living in relation to those things? It's not about letting go of a difficult relationship. It's about being flexible in how we're dealing with the issues that we have. It's about being flexible in considering different approaches to dealing with things in our lives, because who I am today may not be the same as who I was yesterday in terms of the things that might happen in my life. A change in our context, our individual life context, can have an effect in how we deal with things. Like a change in financial position can change a lot in your life. And I think that probably everyone can relate to that. That we have to be flexible in the positions that we are in, whether it is financial or interpersonal or work-related. Sometimes even something like death of a close friend or family member, that can change a lot. And who we are in relation to those changes is what's going to determine how we deal with these changes, who we are in how we experience ourselves, the choices that we make, the choices that we are willing to consider, and the choices that we're not willing to consider. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. So if you have any questions or comments, please, you can send a direct message to the page, or you can leave a comment on the video below. If you are enjoying what I'm doing and enjoying the support that I'm doing on the Get Real page, then you can become a patron on the Patreon Get Real profile. I will put the link below in the video description. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.